Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice introduction, John, thank you. In the mid-1780s, there was an air ballooning craze in England, and everybody was doing it. There was a guy called Vincenzo Lunardi, who it won't surprise you to learn was a foreign gentleman, and he made the first balloon ascent in this country, and it very quickly became a very big deal. In fact, Edward Jenner of smallpox vaccination fame, he met his future wife when he crash landed in her father's back garden. So everybody was doing it, but at about this time there was also kept in Brooks's Club, which was one of the main gentlemen's clubs of the period. There was a wager book in which gentlemen members used to keep a record of all the bizarre and outlandish bets and wagers that they made with each other, and the eye-watering sums of money involved. And there's a one-line entry from that book which dates to 1785, which is right in the middle of that air ballooning craze, and I'd like to read it to you because I think it's quite telling. It's only one line, but it goes like this: Lord Cholmondeley has given 2 guineas to Lord Derby to receive 500 guineas whenever his lordship fucks a woman in a balloon 1,000 yards from Earth. Now, the reason I've troubled you with appalling language so early in the proceedings is basically to make a point that we like to think as a species that we've moved on, that we live in a world that perhaps our ancestors would look at and be amazed and befuddled by, and I suppose in many respects, at least outwardly, we do. We have incredible space travel, we have medicine, communication, all those sort of things, but do we really live in a world that's so foreign to our ancestors that they wouldn't recognise it if they came back? I'm not so sure. And I'm always amazed when you think about it, all these sort of areas of human endeavour that have opened up through the years, it's amazing how quickly when something new comes along, somebody automatically wonders how they can get sex into the equation. So printing comes along and you get mass-produced erotica. Ballooning comes along, somebody automatically thinks of the Mile High Club, as we've just heard. Photography, somebody thinks, I could make a fortune selling photographs of naked ladies. And the internet, of course, is deluged with porn. So I don't think we've moved on a great deal. We, as a nation, I think we're all obsessed with muck and fun. I mean, if we're honest, we're a nation of binge-drinking, sex-obsessed louts. We might not care to admit it, but I think we honestly are. And the 18th century was just as obsessed with muck, fun, and scandal as we are. The Gin Lane Gazette, which is an idea that's been brewing in my mind for about 3 years. The idea behind it is it's kind of an obvious idea, really, in that the 18th century was the first great age of newspapers. It was an age where scandal and intrigue interested the readership of 18th century newspapers just as much as, you know, Rebecca Brooks's son interests some readers today. And the idea is it will be a compendium of best bits from a fictional Georgian newspaper, but as John said, dealing with entirely true stories. Now, I could explain the concepts behind the book until the cows come home, but I thought it would be easier. I'm about halfway through the writing process now, and I thought it would be easier if I just read you sort of a small handful of excerpts so you can get a feel for what I'm trying to achieve with the book. So, the first piece I'd like to read, which is actually the first story that will appear in the book, concerns some earthquakes that hit London in late winter of 1750. And the headline is "The Late Earthquakes and the Flight of London Citizenry." At around midday on the 8th of February last, there was felt a slight earthquake in London, and though it discomforted the populace, it signified little. At 5:30 in the morning, precisely 1 month later, the 8th of March, a second quake of greater magnitudes shook the city, starting many from their slumbers, flinging down 2 old houses, toppling stones from the spire of Westminster Abbey, and chiming the bells of many steeples. Dogs howled in uncommon tones, and the fish in the Thames were seen to jump half a yard above the water. We are given to understand that a servant maid was thrown from her bed in Charterhouse Square and suffered broken arm. In anticipation of a third earthquake and yet greater calamities on the impending 8th of April, London's citizens, jaundiced with fear, began to flee the city in droves and slept in the open air on the slopes of Hampstead, Highgate and Islington. The threats of disreputable news sheets to publish lists of all the nobility and gentry who were to leave this place through fear of another earthquake had no discernible effect upon the numbers of fugitives. On the evening of the 5th of April, the roads out of London were crowded with carriages, and many sat in their coaches all night in Hyde Park, passing their time at cards by the light of candles. Perhaps more disquieting than any earthquake has been the sudden proliferation of charlatans and mountebanks seeking to profit by these events. The mantua makers have sold great numbers of earthquake gowns to fearful ladies sleeping out of doors, and a country quack has been peddling pills which he vouchsafes are good against an earthquake. A shoemaker of Carnaby Market claimed to have been visited by an angel foretelling the certain destruction of the world on the 8th of April, and a mad lifeguardsman was arrested and carried to Bedlam for stirring panic with his fearful prophecies. The Bishop of London averred that the earthquakes were a judgment from God upon the city to punish the trade in bawdy prints and books, citing Mr. John Cleland's infamous novel, The Memoirs of a Woman of Pleasure, as a principal spur to the Almighty's wrath. He condemned the book, chronicling the amatory adventures of its abandoned heroine, Fanny Hill, as an open insult upon religion and good manners, and a reproach to the houses of the government and the law of the country. Mr. Charles Wesley preached a sermon also and bade us prepare to meet our God. We are happy to record that the 8th of April came and passed without incident. The second one I'd like to read, it's very short, but I thought it would actually interest Unbound's very own gout sufferer, John Mitchinson. This is of Tissot's treatise upon the dangers of masturbation, lately published. A work entitled Onanism, or a treatise upon the disorders produced by masturbation by the foreign gentleman, Samuel Auguste André David Tissot, is now published in English and seeks to warn its readers of the dangerous effects of secret and excessive venery. It is the contention of the author that semen is an essential oil and a stimulus, and its excessive and habitual discharge from the body precipitates all manner of afflictions, amongst which are gout, rheumatism, blood in the urine, weakening of the organs of generation, impaired vision, loss of appetite, headaches and nervous disorders, and the diminution of strength, reason and memory. If these assertions are to be believed, then this nation is surely burdened with the most enfeebled set of parliamentarians and peers in Europe. Two more and then I'll leave it alone, I promise. This is one of my favourite stories. It deals with perhaps one of the best-known gentlemen's clubs of the period. The headline is of the Earl of Sandwich attacked by Mr. John Wilkes's baboon. This is also, I should say, by the fictional gossip columnist who writes for the Gazette, who goes by the name of the Seven Dial Stroller. I have often scandalised you with news and infamous... Sorry, I'll start that again. I have often scandalised you with news of the infamous and lewd practices of Sir Francis Dashwood's Hellfire Club, the Friars of the Order of St. Francis. Yet though the old libertine is appointed Chancellor of the Exchequer, a position of respect and emolument, he lately allows his sensualist confederates even greater licence at Medmenham than heretofore reported. Rumour reaches me that the friars lately performed a black mass, during which they screamed imprecations at God and dared him to prove his existence. Unbeknown to most of those present, Mr. John Wilkes MP had procured a baboon, perhaps from his fellow friar, Sir Henry Van Sittart, the Governor of Bengal, arraying it in a devil's garb and concealing it in a chest kept by the friars for the purposes of storing the accoutrements of their diabolical ceremonies. This chest was secured with a spring lock to which the sneaking dog Wilkes had tied a cord, running it under the carpet to his customary chair, that he might lay his hand upon it at an apposite juncture. Growing weary of the ungodly ceremony unfolding before him, Wilkes of a sudden released the baboon from its skulking hole, whereupon it leapt onto the altar and then onto the shoulder of the startled fool Lord Sandwich, who is said to have addressed the creature in the following manner: "Spare me, gracious devil, spare a wretch who was never sincerely your servant. I have sinned only from the vanity of being in fashion. I never committed 1,000th part of the vices of which I boasted. Take someone else, they are all worse than I." Taking pity upon his lordship, one of the party was able to defenestrate the baboon, who showed greater sense than his jailers in quitting the scene and has not been heard of since. Wilkes was inveigled into this circle of voluptuaries by the late Mr. Thomas Potter MP, the Vice Treasurer of Ireland, a man so abandoned to vice that he once boasted of sodomising a cow on Wingrove Common in the county of Buckinghamshire. Last one. This is about Charlotte Hayes, who ran one of London's most popular high-class brothels. Of the rites of Venus performed by Mrs. Charlotte Hayes and her lewd feast of Otaheite, attended by gentlemen of the first rank. The celebrated travels of Captain James Cook amongst the amorous peoples of the South Seas, which are lately published in volumes edited by Mr. John Hawkesworth, have entranced and titillated the public to such a degree that Mrs. Charlotte Hayes has lately seen fit to offer her patrons a scandalous performance of Otaheitean venery. Mrs. Hayes let it be known that her establishment in King's Place would present a dozen unsullied and untainted nymphs and 12 of the most athletic and best proportioned young men to perform the celebrated rites of Venus in the salacious manner practised on the island of Otaheite under the tutelage of Queen Oberea, in which guise Mrs. Hayes was herself to appear. Her advertisement met with much approval, and she was pleased to welcome no less than 23 visitors on the allotted evening, consisting chiefly of the first nobility, baronets, and but 5 commoners. The proceedings began at 7 o'clock with a presentation to the nymphs of a nail 12 inches in length, in imitation of the gifts received by the ladies of Otaheite from the hands of lecherous British sailors, iron being prized highly by the islanders. Thereafter, each youth gave his nymph a dildo-shaped object, wreathed in flowers and 1 foot in length. The couples then copulated with remarkable dexterity and vigour in a manner the onlookers could not hope to emulate. These exertions were accompanied by suitable music, and before long the spectators had lashed themselves into such a frenzy of lasciviousness that they invaded the floor, laid hold of the nymphs, and gave their passions free rein. They later refreshed themselves with bumpers of champagne and did not quit King's Place until 4 o'clock in the morning. I always think of that one as sort of sex as a spectator sport with a pitch invasion at the end. That's all I have for you. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you'll consider pledging. I hope you'll consider pledging towards all the books this evening, because there's some fantastic stuff on the go with Unbound. Thank you very much indeed.